Clerics and wizards are getting a lot of representation in today's weekly top 10. Welcome to the Twisted Tentacle Inn. I'm your innkeeper, and today we'll be talking about the top 10 defensive spells in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, there's not really that many rules for the top 10 other than the spells have to be defensive spells, as I've categorized them in the video that's in the video description below. And starting off with number 10, we're going to go with Death Ward. This spell is a 4th level abjuration spell castable by Cleric and Paladin. This spell is actually pretty awesome. It can help keep your party alive, or whoever you cast it on alive. It lasts 8 hours, no concentration needed. Anyone who is reduced to 0 hit points that you've cast a spell on gets to come back to 1 hit point. Kind of like the half-orc race in the player's handbook. You're reduced to 0 hit points, you come back to 1 hit point, and it happens one time and then the spell ends. You can affect one creature with it, but because it lasts 8 hours with no concentration, there are ways around it so that you're able to get almost your entire party to have Death Ward on them throughout an adventuring day. And at number 9, we have Heroism. This is a 1st level enchantment spell castable by bards and paladins, and it's 1 action to cast. It requires you to touch your target, and it's 1 minute duration with concentration. You basically touch a willing creature, and basically until the spell ends, they're immune to the frightened condition, which is really awesome. Plus, every round they're going to gain temporary hit points equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. So every round, it's almost like they're regenerating those temporary hit points. If they get hit one round, first that damage is deducted from the temporary hit points, then from their own hit points. Then the following round, they gain that many temporary hit points again. So it's almost like having a buffer to damage. Plus, they're immune to the frightened condition, which at low levels is a huge detriment to barbarians and fighters, and even paladins at times. The fear condition is something that they really, really hate. Any frontline combatant is going to hate that condition. So being immune to it is a huge, huge boon. So it's a great defense for your party, especially at lower levels. At number 8, we have Armor of Agathys. This is a very popular 1st level spell castable by warlocks. The spell basically takes an action to cast and it lasts an hour without requiring concentration. The great thing about this spell is that it scales really well. So when you cast it at 1st level, you get 5 temporary hit points, and if a creature hits you, they're going to take 5 cold damage. No saving throw, they just take the damage. And then as long as you have those temporary hit points, you're dealing 5 cold damage. So if a creature hits you for 2 damage, they take 5 cold damage. You still have 3 temporary hit points left, which means if another creature hits you, they're also going to take 5 cold damage. And as the spell goes up, as you upcast it to higher levels, you gain 5 additional hit points for each level cast above 1st. So if you cast it as a 5th level spell, which warlocks automatically upcast to their highest available spell slot, then you would get 25 temporary hit points. Every time a creature hits you, they take 25 points of cold damage. There's very few creatures other than boss creatures at 9th level is when you cast 5th level spells. There's very few creatures that are doing 25 points of damage other than boss creatures. So a creature hits you for 10 damage, they're taking 25 cold damage. Then they hit you again, because they might have multi-attack, for 10 damage. They're going to take another 25 points of damage. So that's 50 damage you dealt with no attack roll needed, no saving throw. Pretty awesome. The only thing is cold damage is a highly resisted type of damage. A lot of creatures are immune to it. So just check which campaign you're playing in. Check with your Dungeon Master, because if you're playing in the wrong type of campaign, this may not be as powerful. It's also a spell that I think is overly touted as strong. It is very strong in particular characters, especially frontline characters, like if you're building a Hexblade Warlock. But if you're going to be standing from range, you're barely going to get any use out of this spell. The temporary hit points are going to be the bigger benefit, and then it's going to be kind of a incentive for creatures to not hit you once they do hit you. But if you're doing things right, if you're a faraway caster, then you're probably not going to be getting hit very often. Some people have said the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer benefits from the spell a lot, but I don't think so, because as a sorcerer, you're not going to be in the front lines. If you are, you're going to go down pretty quickly, even with this spell on. And even though the spell is decent, if you're not a frontline combatant, then really you have no business being in the front lines, and therefore this spell is not going to benefit you as much as you might think. But it's still a great defensive spell. It's an incentive for creatures to stop hitting you, so that I think that's what makes it a really good defensive option. At number 7, we have Globe of Invulnerability. This is a 6th level abjuration spell castable by sorcerers and wizards. It takes 1 action to cast, and it has a 1 minute duration, which requires concentration. This spell is pretty awesome. You cast it, and it covers a 10-foot radius, and it stays around you, so it moves with you. This 10-foot radius basically makes you immune to being affected by spells of 5th level or lower. That is crazy good. Even if those spells are upcast, it blocks them. So if someone is upcasting a fireball to 9th level, you're not going to be affected by it, because that's normally a 3rd level spell. That makes this spell really strong. And not just that, but if you upcast it, it scales. So if you upcast it to a 7th level spell, it blocks 6th level spells or lower. If you upcast it to a 9th level spell, it blocks 8th level spells or lower, which means only 9th level spells are going to be able to get through there. Now, spells can target you, but they have no effect on you. And even spells that are cast in the area that don't necessarily target you don't affect you when you're within that area of that is being affected. So very awesome defensive spell, especially at the higher levels. And I think it definitely belongs on this list. At number 6, we have Spirit Guardians. This is a 3rd level conjuration spell that's castable by Cleric. Takes 1 action to cast and lasts 10 minutes, which requires concentration. This spell is one of the strongest 3rd level spells in the game, if not the strongest. It's a Cleric's basically main weapon once they hit 5th level. This spell is amazing. Not only does it create difficult terrain for creatures that are trying to reach you, slows them down so they can't necessarily get to you, but it deals damage to them. It punishes them for coming close to you. This spell is really, really awesome and disincentivizes creatures from coming at you into melee, so you can be safe and feel safe casting your control spells and all that from a distance. I can't think of a cleric that I've ever played at a table with that didn't take the spell, because it's so good. It almost kind of like Eldritch Blast. It almost should be a part of just the cleric class, because it is that good that it is almost a necessity for every cleric to take it. At number 5, we have Foresight. This is a 9th level divination spell that's castable by bards, druids, warlocks, and wizards. Basically, it's an awesome spell that lets you see into the future and therefore avoid getting hit and making it easier for you to hit others. What it does is it takes 1 minute to cast. It lasts for 8 full hours without requiring concentration. And whoever you cast this on, you can target one creature with it. They're going to have advantage on all their attack rolls and ability checks, as well as saving throws, which is fantastic. And then any creature trying to attack them is going to have disadvantage to attack them on their attack rolls. Really, really amazing spell for defense, but also works great as an offensive spell to boost the ability. It's basically one of the greatest buff spells because it boosts the ability of a creature to attack and hit and all that stuff. But it also boosts your saving throws and gives disadvantage to attacks against you, which makes it really hard for spells to affect you and really hard for creatures to hit you. Excellent defensive spell. At number 4, we have Holy Aura. This is an 8th level abjuration spell castable only by clerics. Casting time of 1 action, and it lasts 1 minute, which requires concentration. This one is awesome. I think better than Foresight because it's very similar to Foresight, but it's a lower level spell, and what's awesome is you can affect more than one creature. So what it does is all the creatures that are affected are going to have advantage on all saving throws, and creatures that attack them are going to have disadvantage to attack them. Basically, Foresight minus the bonus to attack rolls, but the good thing is you can affect multiple creatures and for a lower level spell. That's why this spell is higher on the list than Foresight. It's basically Foresight, but better as a defensive spell, at least. At number 3, we have Absorb Elements. This is a 1st level abjuration spell castable by Artificer, Druid, Ranger, Sorcerer, and Wizard. What it does is it's a reaction spell, which already makes it great because it doesn't mess with your action economy. And if you're hit by any type of elemental damage, you absorb it, so you take only half damage. You gain resistance to it, basically. And then you can keep that energy, so when you attack next time, you deal damage, extra damage, that's equivalent to the type of damage that you took. So if you took fire damage, you do a little bit of extra fire damage when you attack next round. It's really cool. Even if you don't benefit from the attacks, like if you're a wizard, you're probably not going to benefit from the extra damage that you're going to get the following round. But even without that stipulation, as a first level spell, gaining resistance to an elemental damage type, that's always going to be relevant your entire adventuring career. That's what makes this spell amazing. Plus, doesn't mess with your action economy, which is huge. At number 2, we have Shield. It's a first level abjuration spell, castable by sorcerers and wizards, has a range of self, and lasts just 1 round. It's a reaction, just like Absorb Element, great for action economy because it doesn't mess with the rest of your action economy. If someone attacks you, immediately you can cast this spell and boost your armor class by 5, which is insane. Boosting it by 5 is such a reduction in their chance to hit you that it's almost a guarantee that they're not going to hit, as long as you have a decent AC. So great spell if you're stuck in the middle of combat. And the reason it's ahead on the list over Absorb Elements is because this will also, just like Absorb Elements, be relevant throughout your entire adventuring career. But not just that, you will be using this more often than Absorb Elements because there are always going to be creatures trying to attack you with attack rolls. And of course, at number 1, we have Counterspell. It's a 3rd level abjuration spell that's castable by sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. And you guys know the drill. Counterspell is a spell that can really help your party avoid tremendous amounts of damage. There's nothing that can hurt your party more than an enemy spellcaster, and being able to prevent that spellcaster from affecting your group is tremendous. Sure, it has certain limitations, and I go into it in detail in a video that I made about Counterspell and Dispel Magic. I'll link it in the video description in the comments. But despite those limitations, Counterspell, it just can't be beat, especially when you get to the higher levels. Again, there's nothing, no enemy attack that's going to devastate your party more than some kind of enemy spellcaster with a major area of effect spell or a control spell or something that can completely annihilate your party, not just with damage, but with other effects that are really going to decimate you guys. So that does it. That is the best defensive spell in the game, is Counterspell. It's not great in all situations. No single defensive spell is good for all situations. But I think Counterspell definitely takes the win as far as most useful for defense and keeping you safe, especially as a spellcaster, because you're going to be in the back lines, and most of the types of attacks that are going to be done against you are going to be spells. And that does it for today's video on the top 10 defensive spells. What do you guys think? Do you have a different list? Do you have other defensive spells that you think are better that should belong on the list? Or does your list look completely different than mine? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know in the comments down below. And that does it for today's video. If you have any other questions or comments, leave them there in the comments down below. As always, I'm your innkeeper from the Twisted Tentacle Inn. Check in anytime. I'll talk with you then.